several days ago and I didn't get to it, so I'm gonna still do it, but I'm gonna change it around. So I wanted to do a live stream on International Women's Day. That got backed up because I did a stream talking about the guy who died uh, by execution in a firing squad in South Carolina. So I wanted to talk on that and my thoughts on the on capital punishment, which fell on Women's Day. So the next day I said I would do Women's Day, but I didn't get around to it because I ended up doing some other stuff. So I posted a long form video. Please check that out, where I talk about stuff dealing with uh, black culture stuff. If you're interested in that sort of thing, if not, yeah, it's cool. But neither Sunday nor yesterday I talked about Women's Day, so I'm gonna do it today. But since it's a few days past, I want to. I'm going to talk about it in a philosophical context by reading from a classic text on the rights of women from my trusty textbook here. I know it's facing backwards, so I'm sorry about that. The Experience of Philosophy, 6th edition, by former professors at my alma mater. So I'm reading from that again. Kel Surprise. um, but I think it'll be good, and hopefully, I'll have some women viewers who might want to participate, or anyone participate. Really, I don't care. Um, and hopefully, this will also ameliorate what I talked about a few days ago when I, went a little red pill and told people, hey, people need to understand that there are trade-offs when it comes to things, particularly dealing with relationships and all that sort of stuff. And I had to give people a dose of reality that, hey, if you're over half a century years old, no one finds you sexually desirable anymore if you're a woman, and and other sorts of things. So hopefully this will be um, a bit of a solve to that from that previous live stream. So I'm going to read from this in a moment. But again, guys, if you wouldn't mind, please give me a like, share, and a subscribe. It helps out a lot. Help me grow the channel. Got plenty of things planned coming this year. Now that we're at 2,000 subs, I hope to make 10,000 by the end of the year. So please give me a subscribe and a like. It helps me a lot, and share the video. Um, and again, internet. It was International Women's Day a few days ago. Yesterday it was Super Mario Day, actually. For people who don't know, like if you're a gamer, if you're a hardcore gamer, you might have known that yesterday was Super Mario Day because March the 10th, MAR 10. So Super Mario Day was yesterday. I'm not going to do a stream on Super Mario though. um, and it was Chuck Norris' birthday. Chuck Norris, Sensei Chuck Norris, yesterday turned 85 years old. 85. Here's the thing: Chuck Norris actually died 20 years ago. It's just the death was too afraid to tell him. So anyway, in all seriousness, I'm about to read this essay, which I hope people will actually like. Let me just get stuff situated. Okay. And people may have heard of this person before. He said that's hilarious. Thanks. I mean, if anybody want to come in with their favorite Chuck Norris jokes, go right on ahead. I'm gonna put on my reading glasses here because unfortunately I'm at the age where I need reading glasses. Right. Where are we? Oh, thank you, Jesse. Sorry, Jay. Definitely, um, a blessed live another day, of course. All right. Now I forgot my place where this essay is. Give me 1 second, guys, so I can find this. Oh, I was oh, completely in the wrong part of the book. So again, this is for International Women's Day, but I'm gonna approach it from a philosophical point of view by reading a classic essay called "The Rights of Women" by Mary Wollstonecraft. Okay, so um, Mary Wollstonecraft was born near London to a farming family made poor when her father squandered their family fortune. This is in the 1700s, guys, just for you to know how long ago women have been talking about their rights and stuff like that. So isn't this isn't contemporary. This is actually like um, during the age of enlightenment. She supported herself as a teacher and governess while struggling to become a writer. She attained success in 1787 with thoughts on the education of daughters, in which she argued against Rousseau's position on the education of women. Talking about uh, the philosopher Rousseau. According to Rousseau, women should be educated, quote, to please, to be useful to us, to make us love and esteem them, to educate us when young and take care of us when grown up, to advise, to console us, to render our lives easy and agreeable. These are the duties of women at all times and what they should be taught in their infancy, unquote. I thought Rousseau was more progressive than that, but that's crazy. What's up, Abdul? So one Wollstonecraft brilliantly met such arguments on their own terms, showing how such an education would produce women who were mere quote unquote propagators of fools, and that such an education was in the interests of neither men nor women. Women, she argues, were as suited to as men to wisdom and rationality, and society should allow them to attain with equal rights to philosophy and education. Her book attracted wide attention and won her wide support. Well, won her the support of many philosophers, including William Godwin, a political anarchist whom she married. You need to stop flooding the chat with that, or I'm gonna block you. So, in her most famous work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, in 1792, she advocated equal rights for women in a way that would not be realized for another century and a half. So, again, she was an early advocate of women's rights back in the 1700s, well before the era of before the wave of feminism that hit America and Western Europe in the well in the late 19 well early 1900s, no early sorry late 1800s, early 1900s. um, she died giving birth to a daughter, Mary Godwin, known throughout the world today by her married name, Mary Shelley, the author of one of the most famous novels of all time, Frankenstein, which is interesting because I confused Mary Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft. I thought they were the same two people. So she was actually so the writer of Frankenstein was actually her daughter. That's interesting because previously I thought they were the same two people. And Frankenstein is a classic work of fiction that led to, of course, the horror movie and all that good stuff. So this I'm going to be reading a selection from her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792. And again, this is in honor of International Women's Day that occurred this weekend. Okay, if any no one wants to listen, that's fine. But hopefully, people will watch this on replay. So here we go. From the respect paid to property flow as from a poison fountain, most of the evils and vices which render this world such a dreary scene to the contemplative mind, for it is in the most polished society that noisome replies and venomous serpents lurk under their rank herbage, and there is voluptuousness pampered by the still sultry air, which relaxes every good disposition before it ripens into virtue. One class presses on another, for all are aiming to procure respect on account of their property, and property once gained will procure the respect due only to talents and virtue. Men neglect the duties incumbent on man, yet are treated like demigods. Religion is also separated from morality by a ceremonial veil, yet women wonder that the world is almost literally speaking a den of sharpers or oppressors. Hmm. Interesting way to start out. There is a homely proverb which speaks shrewd truth that whoever the devil finds idle, he will employ. And what but habitual idleness can heredity, wealth, and titles produce? For man is so constituted that he can only attain a proper use of his faculties by exercising them, and will not exercise them unless necessity of some kind first set the wheels in motion. Virtue, likewise, can only be acquired by the discharge of relative duties, but the importance of these sacred duties will scarcely be felt by the being who's cajoled out of his humanity by the flattery of sycophants. There must be more equality established in society, or morality will never gain ground, and this virtuous equality will not rest firmly, even when founded on a rock, if one half of mankind be chained to its bottom by fate, for they will be continually undermining it through ignorance or pride. So again, this is written in the late 1700s when she's talking this stuff, and not that I don't disagree with what she's saying, but I don't really agree with sort of egalitarianism um, in the way that many advocates, women's rights advocates do. I think you can advocate for women's rights without also advocating for egalitarianism, but I just wanted to, that's just my own thoughts. Anyway, it is vain to expect virtue from women till they are in some degree independent of men. Nay, it is vain to expect that strength of natural affection which would make them good wives and mothers. While they are absolutely dependent on their husbands, they will be cunning, mean, and selfish. And the men who can be gratified by the fawning fondness of spaniel like affection have not much delicacy, for love is not to be bought. In any sense of the words, its silken wings are instantly shriveled up when anything beside a return in kind is sought. Yet, whilst wealth enervates men, and women live, as it were, by their personal charms, how can we expect them to discharge those ennobling duties which equally require exertion and self denial? Hereditary property sophisticates the mind, and the unfortunate victims to it, if I may so express myself, swathed from their birth, seldom exert the locomotive faculty of body or mind, and thus viewing everything through one medium and that a false one, they are unable to discern in what true merit and happiness consist. False indeed must be the light when the drapery of situation hides the man and makes him stalk a masquerade, dragging from one scene of dissipation to another the nerveless limbs that hang with stupid listlessness and rolling round the vacant eye which plainly tells us that there is no mind at home. Wow. You would be surprised that she herself, ended up with a spouse the way she's talking, but yeah. Let me continue. So I mean therefore to infer that the society is not properly organized, which does not compel men and women to discharge their respective duties by making it the only way to acquire that countenance from their fellow creatures, which every human being wishes some way to attain. The respect, consequently, which is paid to wealth and mere personal charms is a true northeast blast that blights the tender blossoms of affection and virtue. So I'm be making frequent water stops because I'm quite parched. Nature has wisely attached affections to duties to sweeten toil and to give that vigor to the exertions of reason which only the heart can give. But the affection which is put on merely because it is the appropriated insignia of a certain character when its duties are not fulfilled is one of the empty compliments which vice and folly are obliged to pay virtue and the real nature of things. Mm. So it sounds like she's also a bit of a virtue ethicist as well. If I'm understanding her correctly, I'm gonna take this vest off because I'm actually hot. So give me a second, guys. To illustrate my opinion, I need only observe that when a woman is admired for her beauty and suffers herself to be so intoxicated by the admiration she receives as to neglect to discharge the indispensable duty of a mother, she sins against herself by neglecting to cultivate an affection that will equally tend to make her useful and happy. True happiness, I mean all the contentment and virtuous satisfaction that can be snatched in this imperfect state, must arise from well regulated affections, and an affection includes a duty. Men are not aware of the misery they cause and the vicious wickedness they cherish by only inciting women to render themselves pleasing. They do not consider that they thus make natural and artificial duties clash by sacrificing the comfort and respectability of a woman's life to voluptuous notions of beauty when in nature they all harmonize. Cold water be the heart of a husband, were he not rendered unnatural by early debauchery, who did not feel more delight at seeing his child suckled by its mother than the most artful wanton tricks could ever raise. Yet this natural way of cementing the matrimonial tie and twisting the steam with fonder recollections, wealth leads women to spurn. To preserve their beauty and wear the flowery crown of the day which gives them a kind of right to reign for a short time over the sex. They neglect to stamp impressions on their husbands' hearts. They will be remembered with more tenderness when the snow on their head began to chill the bosom than even their virgin charms. The maternal solicitude of a reasonable, affectionate woman is very interesting, and the chastened dignity with which a mother returns to caresses that she and her child receive from a father who has been fulfilling the serious duties of his station is not only a respectable but a beautiful sight. So singular indeed are my feelings, and I have endeavored not to catch factitious ones, that after having been fatigued with the sight of insipid grandeur and the slavish ceremonies that with cumbrous pomp supplied the place of domestic affections, I have turned to some other scene to relieve my eye by resting it on the refreshing green everywhere scattered by nature. I have then viewed with pleasure a woman nursing her children and discharging the duties of her station with perhaps merely a servant maid to take off her hands the servile part of the household business. I have seen her prepare herself and children with only the luxury of cleanliness to receive her husband, who returning weary home in the evening found smiling babes and clean hearth. My heart has loitered in the midst of the group and has even throbbed with sympathetic emotion when the scraping of the well known foot has raised a pleasing tumult. You know, this probably would sound better with a woman reading it, to be quite honest. Uh, Another thing I find mm, not necessarily uh, ironic, but um, I, it comes to mind that this is a woman, a woman of a higher station complaining, because let's be honest, if she was someone in the of a lower social station, she probably wouldn't be in a place to even be worrying about these sorts of things. Hey Agatha. Let me continue. So whilst my benevolence has been has been gratified by contemplating this artless picture, I have thought that a couple of this description equally necessary and independent of each other, because each fulfilled the respective duties of their station, possessed all that life could give, raised sufficiently above abject poverty not to be obliged to wait the consequence of every farthing they spend, and having sufficient to prevent their attending to a frigid system of economy which narrows both heart and mind. I declare, so vulgar are my conceptions that I know not what is wanted to render this happiest as well as the most respectable situation in the world but a taste for literature, to throw a little variety and interest into social converse, and some superfluous money to give to the needy and to buy books. For it is not pleasant, when the heart is opened by compassion and the head active in arranging plans of usefulness, to have a prim urchin continually twitching back the elbow to prevent the hand from drawing out an almost empty purse, whispering at the same time some prudential maxim about the priority of justice. So, to be fair, like, yes, clearly she's a woman, she's a woman of privilege writing this. So, I think it is fair to give it a grain of salt hearing that privileged women complain, right? But to be fair to her as well, just because she's of privilege doesn't mean she's wrong in what she's saying, right? Like, just because she's of privilege doesn't mean that she can't want for better. So, uh, you know, I get that. Destructive, however, as riches and and inherited honors are to the human character, women are more debased and cramped, if possible, by them than men, because men may still, in some degree, unfold their faculties by becoming soldiers and statesmen. Unless you're the woman king, and then I guess you can do that too. No, I'm joking. The woman king wasn't actual history, guys, but that's a story for another day. As soldiers, I grant they can now only gather for the most part vainglorious laurels, whilst they adjust to a hair the European balance, taking a special care that no bleak northern nook or sound incline the beam. But the days of a true heroism are over when a citizen fought for his country like a Fabricius or a Washington. Did I say that right? Is it Fabricius or is it Fabricius? I don't know how you pronounce that name. Sorry. Someone can correct me if they want. Anyway, and then returned to his farm to let his virtuous fervor run in a more placid but not a less salutary stream. No, our British heroes are oftener sent from the gambling table than from the plow, and their passions have been rather inflamed by hanging with dumb suspense on the turn of a die than sublimated by painting after the adventurous march of virtue in the historic page. She's cooking, guys. Not that I necessarily agree, but um, let's continue. And yes, I have holes in these shirts, guys. Eh, I mean, I was cold at first. That's why I had on the vest. So the statesman, it is true, might with more propriety quit the faro bank or card stable to guide the helm, for he has still but to shuffle and trick the whole system of British politics, if system it may courteously be called, consisting in multiplying dependents and contriving taxes which grind the poor to pamper the rich. Thus, a war or any wild goose chase is as the vulgar use the phrase a lucky turn up of patronage for the minister, whose chief merit is the art of keeping himself in place. It is not necessary then that he should have bowls for the poor so he can secure for his family the odd trick, or should some show of respect for what is termed with ignorant ostentation an Englishman's birthright be expedient to bubble the gruff mastiff that he has to lead by the nose. He can make an empty show very safely by giving his single voice and suffering his light squadron to file off to the other side. And when a question of humanity is agitated, he may dip a sop in the milk of human kindness to silent Cerberus, excuse me, and talk of the interest which has which his heart takes in an attempt to make the earth no longer cry for vengeance as it sucks in its children's blood. Through his cold hand may at the very moment rivet their chains by sanctioning the abominable traffic. A minister who is no longer a minister than while he can carry a point which he is determined to carry. Yet it is not necessary that a minister should feel like a man when a bold push might shake his seat. But to have with these episodical observations, let me return to the home. Excuse me. Let me return to the more specious slavery which chains the very soul of women, keeping her forever under the bondage of ignorance. So she compares the role the role of women to men as sort of a bondage. So this is why you can see how the early suffrage movement, abolitionist movement, felt some sort of ideological bond, right? Not that I necessarily agree, but the preposterous distinctions of rank, which renders civilization a curse by dividing the world between voluptuous tyrants and cunning, envious dependents, corrupt almost equally every class of people because respectability is not attached to the discharge of the relative duties of life, but to the station. And when the duties are not fulfilled, the actions cannot gain sufficient strength to fortify the virtue of which they are the natural reward. Still, there are some loopholes out of which a man may creep and dare to think and act for himself. But for a woman, it is a Herculean task because she has difficulties peculiar to her sex to overcome, which require almost superhuman powers. So she's saying, a man through certain efforts can rise in rank, um, in social rank, but a woman has to keep a certain place in society regardless. So a benevolent legislator always endeavors to make it the interest of each individual to be virtuous, and thus private virtue becoming the cement of public happiness, and orderly whose is consolidated by the tendency of all the parts towards a common center. But the private or public virtue of women is very problematical, for Rousseau and the numerous lists of male writers insist that she should all her life be subjected to a severe restraint, that of propriety. What subject her to propriety? Blind propriety, if she be capable of acting from a nobler spring, if she be an heir of immortality, is sugar always to be produced by vital blood? Is one half of the human species like the poor African slaves to be subject to prejudices that brutalize them when principles would be a sure guard only to sweeten the cup of man? Is it not this indirectly to deny women reason? For a gift is a mockery if it be unfit to use. Again, like I said, so the early women's right movement allied themselves with those of the abolitionists. And this is in the late 1700s. This isn't even in the 1800s, and this is in Britain. So when people think about this stuff, yes, there were people talking about the freedom of slaves even back then, even, in Great Britain in the 1700s. And there were women, and there were people talking about women's rights back then too, she being one of them. So this didn't, this, these movements in America didn't start off in a social vacuum by the early 1800s. This was something that was building up. Let me continue. Get a drink. Okay. Women are in common with men rendered weak and luxurious by the relaxing pleasures which wealth procures. But added to this, they are made slaves to their persons and must render them alluring that men may lend them his reason to guide their tottering steps aright. Or should they be ambitious, they must govern their tyrants by sinister tricks. For without rights, there cannot be any incumbent duties. The laws respecting women, which I mean to discuss in a future part, make an absurd unit of a man and his wife, and then by the easy transition of only considering him as responsible, she is reduced to a mere cipher. So if I may offer my own cynical point here, and I know this may come off a little, you know, maybe a little rough, but I can see why at that time men would have wanted to keep women in their place because both men and women in that time would have been rather stupid and uneducated. The men just as much as the women. So it's kind of different now where women on average are more educated than men. So it makes so this in hindsight to how things are now, we might take this as a given what she's saying, but that wasn't the case back then. So I think that needs to be looked at in its. I think we should look at that in its full context too. Like dealing with a bunch of, well, folks who may not have been the most enlightened of people back then. I mean, mine is people like her, but again, she's obviously a woman of privilege. I mean, she wouldn't even have been a writer if if not. I'm not saying she was born into privilege because, well, actually, no. I'm sorry. Yeah, she was born of privilege. Like, it's just that she became poor because her father squandered the family fortune. But she was born into privilege, and you can it's you can still see it in how she talks. But anyway, let me continue. The being who discharges the duty of its station is independent. And speaking of a woman at large, their first duty is to themselves as rational creatures, and the next in point of importance as citizens is that which includes so many of a mother. The rank in life which dispenses with their fulfilling this duty necessarily degrades them by making them mere dolls, or should they turn to something more important than merely fitting drapery upon a smooth block? Their minds are only occupied by some soft platonic attachment, or the actual management of an intrigue may keep their thoughts in motion. For when they neglect the domestic duties, they have it not in their power to take the field and march and countermarch like soldiers, or wrangle in the Senate to keep their faculties from rusting. I know that as a proof of the inferiority of the sex, Rousseau has exultantly exclaimed, "How can they leave the nursery for the camp?" And the camp has by some moralists been proved the school of the most heroic virtues, though I think it would puzzle a keen casuist to prove the reasonableness of the greater number of wars that have dubbed heroes. I do not mean to consider this question critically, because having frequently viewed these freaks of ambition as the natural mode of civilization, when the ground must be torn up and the woods cleared by fire and sword, I do not choose to call them pests. But surely the present system of war has little connection with virtue of any denomination, being rather the school of finesse and effeminacy than of fortitude. And she has a point. There was a sort of glorification of war in that time, as if it was like not just a part of the human condition, but it was something desirable to like kind of make men into men, and um, make people like, and make these, well, not make men just into men, but make men into heroes, and basically saw it as improving the human experience through conquest of war and all this sort of stuff. But this was only, but she's saying this only applied to men, of course, not to women. Yet, if defensive war the only justifiable war in the present advanced state of society, where virtue can show its face and ripen amidst the rigors which purify the air on the mountain's top, were alone to be adopted as just and glorious, the true heroism of antiquity might again animate female bosoms. But fair and softly, gentle reader, male or female, do not alarm thyself. For though I have compared the character of a modern soldier with that of a civilized woman, I am not going to advise them to turn their distaff into a musket, though I sincerely wish to see the bayonet converted into a pruning hook. I only recreated an imagination fatigued by contemplating the vices and follies which all proceed from a feculent stream of wealth that has muddied the pure rills of natural affection, by supposing that society will some time or other be so constituted that man must necessarily fulfill the duties of a citizen or be despised, and that while he was employed in any of the departments of civil life, his wife, also an active citizen, should be equally intent to manage her family, educate her children, and assist her neighbors. Um, on a quick aside, this is sort of why I wanted to dispel the myth of female samurai. Japanese society, even now, but especially during feudal Japan era, was one of the most patriarchal societies ever. And to think that they would have allowed women into battle was just insane. What it was is that these women fulfilled their duties as wives and daughters by protecting the home. And so, yes, they were taught martial arts, classical martial arts, both like jiu-jitsu and uses of weapons like the naginata, which is a long spear, sort of halberd type thing. But other than one particular case, there's not really been a history of female samurai. But what they were fulfilling were their duties to basically manage the family, even to the and hold down the home, even to the point where they would have to like actually like physically defend the home. But that's not the same as a man going out into the field and you know achieving glory as samurai and all that sort of stuff. I know that's just an aside, but I just wanted to mention that. I like to kind of connect things that I've talked about in the past with current things I'm talking with now. Uh, but to render her rally virtuous and useful, she must not, if she discharge her civil duties, want individually the protection of civil laws. She must not be dependent on her husband's bounty for her subsistence during this during his life or support after his death. For how can a being be generous who has nothing of its own, or virtuous who is not free? The wife in the present state of things who is faithful to her husband and neither suckles nor educates her children scarcely deserves the name of a wife and has no right to that of a citizen, but take away natural rights and duties become null. Hmm, interesting. What's up, TRW? Hope you guys are enjoying the jazz in the background. By the way, crackling fireplace and jazz music ambience, romantic smooth jazz. Let me continue. Women then must be considered as only the wanton solace of men when they become so weak in mind and body that they cannot exert themselves unless to pursue some frothy pleasure or to invent some frivolous fashion. What can be a more melancholy sight to a thinking mind than to look into the numerous carriages that drive helter skelter about this metropolis in a morning full of pale faced creatures who are flying from themselves? I have often wished with Dr. Johnson to place some of them in a little shop with a half a dozen children looking up to their languid countenances for support. I am much mistaken if some Latin vigor would not soon give health and spirit to their eyes, and some lines drawn by the exercise of reason on the on the blank cheeks, which before were only undulated by dimples, might restore lost dignity to the character. Virtue is not to be acquired even by speculation, much less by the negative supineness that wealth naturally generates. And again, I get what she's saying, but I think this attachment to virtue theory is maybe a flaw in her argument, in an otherwise reasonable argument. Anyway, besides, when poverty is more disgraceful than even vice is not morality cut to the quick. Still, to avoid misconstruction, though I consider that women in the common walks of life are called to fulfill the duties of wives and mothers by religion and reason, I cannot help lamenting that women of a superior caste have not a road open by which they can pursue more extensive plans of usefulness and independence. I may excite laughter by dropping a hint when I mean to pursue some future time. For I really think that women ought to have representatives instead of being arbitrarily governed without having any direct share allowed them in the deliberation of government. So again, I'm gonna keep I'm gonna keep repeating this. She's a woman of privilege, and it comes off a little. It it comes not that she is, but it comes off a little bit insincere that a woman of means is going to complain, "Oh, woe is me that I have to stay home and cook and care for the kids," where women of lesser means would not have such luxury. Like they have, like they're working as well as providing, for the children and all this other sort of stuff. Like you're mad because you're not allowed to rise in the type of station that men can, and I get that, but this has been actually a common criticism of feminism today, is that it's usually pushed by women of a higher social status, typically, let's be frank, uh, middle middle to upper white class, uh, liberal white women. Like that was the case then, and it's the case now. And that doesn't mean that what they're advocating for is necessarily wrong, but I think it comes off a little um, aloof to the issues that other women um, undergo. Let me continue. But as the whole system of representation is now in this country only a convenient handle for despotism, they need not complain, for they are all as well represented. Excuse me, for they are as well represented as a numerous class of hardworking mechanics who pay the support of royalty when they can scarcely stop their children's mouths with bread. How are they represented whose very sweat supports the splendid stud of an heir apparent or varnishes the chariot of some female favorite who looks down on shame? Taxes on the very necessities of life enable an endless tribe of idle princes and princesses to pass with stupid pomp before a gaping crowd who almost worship the very parade which cost them so dear. This is mere Gothic grandeur, something like the barbarous, useless parade of having sentinels on horseback at Whitehall, which I can never view without a mixture of contempt and indignation. So she seems to kind of it, I'm gonna keep going, but it seems like she doesn't really respect her station in life, because even though she was born into privilege, like I said, growing up, her family lost all their wealth, and so I guess she's known both sides of the coin, to live in poverty and to live as a person of privilege. But after her childhood, she was able to climb back into that sort of higher on that higher rung of the social ladder in this area of British life. How strangely must the mind be sophisticated when this sort of state impresses it? But till these momentous, excuse me, but till these monuments of folly are leveled by virtue, similar follies will leaven the whole mass, for the same character in some degree will prevail in the aggregate of society. and the refinements of luxury or the vicious repinings of envious poverty will equally banish virtue from society, considered as the characteristic of that society, or only allow it to appear as one of the stripes of the harlequin coat worn by the civilized man. So, if I would think that when she's talking about virtue, one of the things she specifically is talking about is like integrity and things like that. Let me continue. In the superior ranks of life, every duty is done by deputies, as if duties could ever be waived, and the vain pleasures which consequent idleness forces the rich to pursue appear so enticing to the next rank, that the numerous scramblers for wealth sacrifice everything to tread on their heels. The most sacred trusts are then considered as sinecures because they were procured by interest and only sought to enable a man to keep good company. Women in particular all want to be ladies, which is simply to have nothing to do, but listlessly to go they scarcely care where, for they cannot tell what. So yeah, she definitely has a bone to pick with her own uh, lot of women in her social class. But I mean, think of how people would have struggled in that time. It's not a bad thing for a woman to want to be uh, a lady of leisure, like better than cleaning chimneys and or being or having to walk the streets. So just saying. But what have women to do in society? I may be asked, but to loiter with easy grace, surely you would not condemn them all to suckle fools and chronicle small beer. No, women might certainly study the art of healing and be physicians as well as nurses, and midwifery decency seems to allot to them, though I am afraid the word midwife in our dictionaries will soon give place to accoucher, and one proof of the former delicacy of the sex may be effaced from the language. Um, my French is rough, so I wouldn't exactly remember how you would translate which like how you would translate accoucher and how she is using the term. Um, Maybe next time. But anyway, so they might also study politics and settle their benevolence on the broadest basis, for the reading of history will scarcely be more useful than the perusal of romances if read as mere biography. If the character of the times, the political improvements, arts, etc., be not observed, in short, if it not be considered as the history of man and not of particular men who filled the niche in the temple of fame and dropped into the black rolling stream of time, that silently sweeps all before it into the shapeless void called eternity. For shape can it be called that some hath none? Hmm. So again, she's talking about female subordination, but again, the female subordination she talks about only comes with privilege. That is my critique of what she is saying, is that the even and she realizes this too as well, though I think she does from what she's saying here. But the female subordination comes through a certain privilege that these that women of lower stations aspire to be ladies of leisure, where they have nothing to do and will take the subordination as a consolation for being ladies of leisure. Um, she doesn't think it's worth the trade off, I guess. But there are always trade offs, and that's the thing I keep trying to tell folks. There's always trade offs. I mean, she wants a more egalitarian uh, ranking of women of her class, but the only The only egalitarian, the only egalitarianism you usually see is amongst people suffering in poverty. So anyway, businesses business of various kinds they might likewise pursue if they were educated in a more orderly manner, which might save many from common and legal prostitution. Women would not then marry for support as men accept of places under government and neglect their implied duties, nor would an attempt to earn their own subsistence, a most laudable one, sink them almost to the level of those poor abandoned creatures who live by prostitution. For are not milliners and mantua makers reckon the next class? The milliners are the people. I think those are the hat makers or whatever. I'm not sure what the mantua makers are. I'm guessing that's also some sort of clothing or something or other. The few employments open to women so far from being liberal or menial, and when a superior education enables them to take charge of the education of children as governesses, they are not treated like the tutors of sons, though even clerical tutors are not always treated in a manner calculated to render them respectable in the eyes of their pupils, to say nothing of the private comfort of the individual. But as women educated like gentlewomen are never designed for the humiliating situation which necessity sometimes forces them to fill, these situations are considered in the light of a degradation, and they know little of the human heart, who need to be told that nothing so painfully sharpens sensibility to such a fall in life. Some of these women might be restrained from marrying by a proper spirit of delicacy, and the others may not have had it in their power to escape in this pitiful way from servitude. Is not that government then very defective and very unmindful of the happiness of one half of its members? That does not provide for honest, independent women by encouraging them to fill respectable stations. But in order to render their private virtue a public benefit, they must have a civil existence in the state, married or single, else we should continually see some worthy women whose sensibility has been rendered painfully acute by undeserved contempt droop like the quote lily broken down by a plowshare unquote. So definitely talking about the independent women. So it seems like she would say for them to have equal station to men, they should also, I guess, be independent of having to be under men as far as being a wife. And it is a melancholy truth, yet such is the blessed effect of civilization. The most respectable women are the most oppressed. The most respectable women is are the most oppressed. That's interesting, right? Let me continue. And unless they have understandings far superior to the common run of understandings taken in both sexes, they must, from being treated like contemptible beings, be contemptible. How many women thus waste life away, the prey of discontent, who might have practices as physicians, regulated a farm, managed a shop, and stood erect, supported by their own industry, instead of hanging their heads surcharged with the dew of sensibility that consumes the beauty to which it at first gave luster. Nay, I doubt whether pity and love are so near akin as poets feign, for I have seldom seen such compassion excited by the helplessness of females unless they were fair. Then perhaps pity was the soft handmaid of love or the harbinger of lust. How much more respectable is the woman who earns her own bread by fulfilling any duty than the most accomplished beauty? Beauty, did I say, so sensible am I of the beauty of moral loveliness, or the harmonious propriety that attunes the passions of a well regulated mind, that I blush at making the comparison, yet I sigh to think how few women aim at attaining this respectability by withdrawing from the giddy whirl of pleasure or the indolent claim that stupefies the good sort of women it sucks in. Proud of their weaknesses, however, they must always be protected, guarded from care and all the rough toils that dignify the mind. If this be the fiat of fate, if they will make themselves insignificant and contemptible, sweetly to waste quote unquote life away, let them not expect to be valued when their beauty fades, for it is the fate of the fairest flowers to be admired and pulled to pieces by the careless hand that plucked them. In how many ways do I wish from the purest benevolence to impress this truth on my sex? Yet I fear that they will not listen to a truth that dear bought experience has brought home to many an agitated bosom, nor willingly resign the privileges of rank and sex for the privileges of humanity to which those have no claim who do not discharge its duties. What I think she misses is the fact that men have a certain station in life because they have to carry on certain duties as a man in violence, in war, and so things that she's touched upon. Those are what kind of puts those men in the superior position because they are expected to fulfill those roles to you know to I guess how do I want to put it. Um, they we're protected to provide and protect. When war comes, we're the ones going with swords raised, like, and with more responsibility comes more privilege. I think this is something that feminists miss, or when they do get it, they would just say, "Well, if there weren't any men, there wouldn't be any violence." Uh, yes and no, but I don't want to get into that. So anyway, let me finish this up. And I don't know why you always ask me that. You ask me that in every stream, Hendrix. I think I don't know why you keep asking that. So if it's not about the, if people are gonna ask me a question not about the topic, drop it in the super chat or it won't be answered. Anyway, so those writers are particularly useful, in my opinion, who make man feel for man, independent of the station he fills or the drapery of fictitious sentiments. I then would fain convince reasonable men of the importance of some of my remarks and prevail on them to weigh dispassionately the whole tenor of my observations. I appeal to their understandings, and as a fellow creature claim, in the name of my sex, some interest in their hearts. I entreat them to assist to emancipate their companion, to make her a helpmeet for them. That's a common term in the red pill space, a helpmeet. Would men but generously snap our chains and be content with rational fellowship instead of slavish obedience, they would find us more observant daughters, more affectionate sisters, more faithful wives, more reasonable mothers. In a word, better citizens. We should then love them with true affection because we would learn to respect ourselves, and the peace of mind of a worthy man would not be interrupted by the idle vanity of his wife, nor the babe sent to nestle in a strange bosom, having never found a home in their mother's. Huh. That's interesting. And one of the things she says is liberty is the mother of virtue. Basically saying freedom, having freedom and privileges allows you to be a virtuous person. I mean, it has been remarked upon before that, people who who lack certain freedoms or privilege should not be held to a higher standard as those whom do, because they're not in a position where, you know, they may always be able to exercise such virtues. This is why sometimes there's more grace given to, say, criminals who who commit crimes of poverty, so to speak, right? But is liberty the mother of virtue? Would I'll leave that up for you guys to decide that. And if you guys remember when I talked about John Stuart Mill a few days ago, John Stuart Mill himself was a bit of a male feminist. He's a classic libertarian, and he could be considered a male feminist. By today's standards, he wouldn't be. But with fourth wave feminism, their their ideology is so extreme that I don't think even Mary Wollstonecraft would be invited to the party. She would have been more in in line with first wave feminism that came out of the late the late 1800s. Although, like I said, there was inklings of that even in her time in the 1700s with women's rights, but at the time it wasn't called feminism, and there weren't it didn't have the distinctions that came about with the wave of the waves of feminism here in American culture. But as you can see, there are, as being that both John Stuart Mill and Mary Wollstonecraft are feminists, you can see that there is sort of a foundation in classical liberalism for such ideology. And she even like, and we're first saying liberty is a mother of virtue. Like, one of the things that classical liberals, and when I say classical liberals, I'm talking about in the sense of European liberalism, not American liberalism. American liberalism is far is more to the right of classical liberalism. Okay, classical liberalism being, you know, political freedom, economic freedom, individualism, um, freedom of freedom of thought and speech, the pursuit of reason. These sorts of things are like the pillars on which classical liberalism um, is founded. And as such, some of the things that have become part of the political left rise had as rose from classical liberalism, even if they're not actually like tethered to them anymore themselves. But you would, but you can see how many people who believe in things like um, the abolishment of slavery and the women's of right and the rights of women would have came from people who advocated for classical liberalism. So I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. Now, if someone else wanted to like make some comments or talk us specifically about International Women's Day, we can do that. Didn't hear much about it on TV or the news or whatever. Uh, but because I didn't go over it the other day, I just wanted to go over it today, and I thought I could sneak in a little bit of philosophy with it as well. Again, Mary Wollstonecraft is an early feminist philosopher from the 1700s, and her daughter Mary Shelley is the one who wrote Frankenstein. And again, I was confused because I thought Mary Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft are the same people, but no, Mary Shelley's real name was Mary Godwin. So that's what I got confused. But in any case, I mean, unless anyone has any questions, I'm gonna call it a day. Go get something to eat. and do some push-ups before I go to bed. Yes, I have a fidget spinner. So, like I said, if I have any female viewers, well, I don't have any viewers right now, but if I have any female viewers watching this on replay and you wanted to like comment on this, please, leave that comment. And again, this is The Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft, and this is taken from her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, written in 1792. Um, and it's like it's an early defense of women's rights, or of what became feminism. But as you can see, the original movement for women's rights was kind of reasonable. Like, I may not agree in her couching it in the terms of virtue theory, but her argument is otherwise rather reasonable. My biggest criticism of it, aside from it being steeped, um, written in terms of virtue theory, was just the fact that I think that this was more applicable for women of a higher social status, because she's arguing for the very egalitarianism that many women on the bottom actually enjoy. So, but who wants? I don't know. Most people don't want. e- Most people don't want equal zero. Zero is equal, but it's something I don't think a lot of people want. But yeah, we both have nothing. Or, the women of lesser station, she would say they would find themselves resigned to things like, you know, being a prostitute or something like that. So, um, I don't know. But again, there's always trade offs, and she even admits, uh, in that section that I read, that a lot of women would trade, being in a lower station to a higher station, even if it means being subordinate to the men, with whom they marry and take care of or whatever. So, um, interestingly, now there's a lot of women talking about soft girl era who are saying that we've been duped by the feminists into wanting to be independent, not knowing now that we're independent, like, we have to struggle. I'm like, yes, there are trade offs. Like, yes, you can be independent women, like Mary is advocating for, but once you become independent, that means also you got to take care of yourself. Like, you can't expect women. I mean, you can't now expect men to provide for you if you're an independent woman. Like, there are always trade offs, guys. There are always trade offs. Men realize this, or at least rational men do. Um, but a lot of women have grown up today in a culture where they're so entitled, they think that they can have it all, but there's always trade-offs. So you can be independent, but the trade-off is you won't have a family. Vice versa, you can be a traditional woman, but that may mean that you have to set aside your own career ambitions, because you can't have both. You can't have it all. And the women who do seem to have it all are few few and far in between. You know, people will pick out people would pick out unicorns as an example. Say, oh well, what about Michelle Obama, or what about Beyonce? Their lives aren't perfect either. You're just privy to what they show you. And even for the sake of argument, say they do have it all. Again, they're unicorns. They are not most people. Just because they can doesn't mean you can. So I just, want to um, keep that that in mind, so that people have more realistic expectations. But again, guys, I was just reading this because, I wanted to get back to saying something in regards to International Women's Day, and unfortunately, I didn't have my wife available. Neither. the day I wanted to do it or today since she's working, and then the day I did my um, live stream. Well, the day I was going to do my live stream, which I didn't do, she was actually out and about doing her traveling and hiking and all that good stuff that she likes to do when she has free time. So she used her leisure to actually go out and be you know a little adventurous. What's the little cartoon with the girl who Dora the Explorer? That's my wife, Dora the Explorer. So she was out doing her little Dora the Explorer thing. So anywho, um, unless there's any questions, I'm gonna go. People watching this either on replay or possibly live, other than my friend Moonlit. Um, guys, give me a like and a subscribe if you don't mind. Share the video. If you want to show me some support, you can become a member or drop me a super thanks. I appreciate it. And any amount is would be awesome. Uh, and I have my Cash App link in the description if you want to do it that way, because that way I have instant access to it. Okay, but if you want to do it through YouTube, um, since you know you can trust it coming through YouTube, you know you can drop it in a version of a super thanks or buying a membership to the channel. And I do have some members only content, and I'll be making more once I have more members. Once I have a nice membership following, I'll be dropping a lot of members only content. But until then, nay. So that's all I gotta say. I'll give it a few seconds if anyone wants to ask me something before I go. What's up, just a dude? And again, the reading I selected, guys, was "The Rights of Women" by Mary Wollstonecraft. Well, you can watch it on replay, just a dude. Yeah, I'm trying to do things a little early now so I can get up early. It's already late, really, for me. So, um, but yeah, I just wanted to do something because it was International Women's Day the other day. Some might say it's always Women's Day, right? But no. Um, except well, I'm working late shift too, so. Well, I am about to go to bed. I'm tired. I had the jazz on, which isn't helping because jazz puts me to sleep. Not in a bad way, like it's boring, but jazz is just like relaxing, so it helps me go to sleep. And that stems from when I think because I remember driving home when I was a kid and a teenager, and my father would put on jazz while he was driving. It would just put me to sleep. So it still has that same effect. So, all right, guys. Unless anyone has a question, I'm gonna go. Hopefully, you guys can hear the jazz in the background. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. Uh, oh, all right. Well, I guess that's it. So I'm out, guys. Thanks. Have a good night or a good day. Take care.